How about now? That's interesting. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Was it that was, God, that commercial is probably like 13 years old now, isn't it? Because that was, I remember that as a layperson. Jeez. All right. Hello, Yankee. Welcome. I said hello to everybody and nobody heard it. Hello, Rick, Ryan, Karuna. All right. So, as usual, we'll give it a minute or two before we get started. I think last week I cut it off short, didn't I? I think I might cut it off short this week too. It depends on how I feel and how energetic the community is. Hello, Jayantha. Welcome. All right, we'll get started in a minute here. Let me share screen. All right. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Atitang nang vagameya napatikankaya nagatang yadatitang pahinang tang apattanang cha anagatang pachupannang chayo dhammang tatta tatta vipassati asamhirang asankupang tang viddam manubruhaye. Ajeva kitchang atapang ko janya maranang suve nahino sangarang tena mahasene na machuna evang viharing ataping ahoratang atadintang tangve baddekaratoti santo achikate muni. All right, English. A single excellent nice discourse. Let not a person revive the past, or on the future build his hopes. For the past has been left behind, and the future has not been reached. Instead, with insight, let him see each presently arisen state. Let him know that and be sure of it, invincibly, unshakably. Today the effort must be made. Tomorrow death may come, who knows? No bargain with mortality can keep him and his hordes away. But one who dwells thus ardently, relentlessly by day, by night, it is he, the peaceful sage, has said, who has had a single excellent night. Sadhu. All right, friends, it is Monday night. That means it is time for another festival of Dhamma with the Mangaseka community. It's time for Dhammapalooza. Dhammapalooza is, as always, community guided, which means that what activities we'll be doing tonight depends on all of you. Will this be lots of questions or no questions in sutta reading or Dhamma talks or community discussion? Who knows? Each Dhammapalooza is different. So we will give some time in the chat to see what pops up. I know we already do have one question from Rick. And I will say I've been recovering from one of my, I don't know what you call them. I call them my my allergy comas. So I'm not quite 100% well. So I don't know that if there's enough activity and energy, it might keep me up later, but I might call it at an hour tonight. We'll see. So Rick says, Bante, I don't know I know PTSD, but I don't know CPTSD. Chronic? I don't know. That's the first time I'm ever seeing CPTSD. Flashbacks part of the chitta, heart mind, or different part of consciousness. Things in the present trigger mental, physical, emotional responses in the present. So what a flashback is, this PTSD kind of flashback, what this is a response to stimuli. In some ways, it's like a fear response, right? You're a child and, you know, your father beats you up and I don't know, your father beats you up in a cornfield or something, or among certain flowers. And then every time as an adult, 50 years later, you smell that smell of the flowers and it instantly triggers the fear, I'm going to get beat. Right? And this is not just in one place. This is a complex bunch of systems happening here. This is in feeling of the body, right? This is in mind. This is in thoughts, emotions, which are kind of complex amalgamation of mind and body. So these are very complicated complicated experiences that are arising because of stimuli that bring up memories of the past. And so that knowing that, well, then you understand, okay, well, this smell triggers this, right? Or whatever this experience triggers that. So how can I, maybe I can't avoid this certain smell or this certain experience because it's so very commonplace, but it's connected with a uncommon memory, an uncommon trauma. And so the matter becomes then, how do you work through various therapeutic modalities to getting to the point where, you might have an uncomfortable feeling when you have that triggering experience, but it doesn't take you all the way into the trauma like it would have in the past. And that's a long process. Mm. All right. Is there anything else you wanted me to clarify? Anything? Thank you for this clarification. I don't know that it changes anything I would have said, but if you want me to clarify anything specific, if you mention it, I might have more to say. Ryan says, sorry about to hear about the allergies. It's just something I've had my whole life with this body. Could be worse. There could be a lot of there's a lot of other lifelong ailments that somebody can suffer that are worse. But what part of the mind is experiencing the flashback? Well, it's not about a part of the mind. It's about the various systems of body and mind cascading to create the experience. Your body's experiencing the flashback too, isn't it? It's not just in your mind. I mean, if you want to talk about consciousness, it's not like it's not going to be in consciousness because consciousness is connected with the senses. You have, I mean, you by definition have to be conscious to experience trauma. If you're not conscious, you're not going to be triggered by an event, right? You're conscious, and so you will have the triggering from that event. Bante, a friend or a family member recently committed suicide. To what degree are actions and karma mediating this tragedy versus brain malfunction? Difficult to me to reason through. Well, it's a complicated situation, and unless you understand the brain and the karma of this person, you'll just never know. Um, but obviously, if this is somebody you've known for a long time and you have a connection to, this is part of the mind trying to figure out why. And sometimes there's no easy answer why. There's no easy answer necessarily why somebody not only chooses to commit suicide, but actually goes ahead with it. There's a lot of different factors wrapped up in that. So I think short of some kind of long note explaining exactly why, I think this is kind of an aspect of the grieving process, and eventually you let go. You're okay with not knowing. Obviously, this person was in some level of suffering. What are the specifics? We may or we may not know. But they chose to do this action. What are the conditioning factors towards that actions? We may or we may not know. It's like a complicated mix. My condolences to your family and the person's family. Again, if there's any clarifying questions, feel free to say it. Chat's somewhat quiet tonight. Maybe we can read a sutta. Hmm. It's a good question. Are there things we can do as Buddhists for non-Buddhists to help them when they're going through tough times without imposing Buddhism on them? Well, there's lots of things you can do. Not all of them are necessarily Buddhist. Um, Trying to think of it like what specifically Buddhist thing, because there's things come in my mind like, oh, you could do this, this, and this, but I'm like, well, that's not specifically Buddhist. So, hmm. Yeah, again, I don't know. Maybe just because my mind's not all there. I can't think of something specifically Buddhist that you'd have to kind of, I don't know, sneak in. Like sneak in behind the line so that they don't think it's you're imposing Buddhism on them. Like teaching on reincarnation help with framing that suicide doesn't solve problems, but most people don't believe in reincarnation. Yeah, no, well, see that would be. I wouldn't even, like you say, I wouldn't even assume. I wouldn't even make an assumption. I would, if I knew they were a certain religion, I would frame it within their framework. They if they don't believe in it, it doesn't really help for you. It doesn't help them for you to say, something, or say like, may they have a good rebirth, and they're like, whatever. So I think encouraging people to kind of I'm forming something. It's coming. Encouraging people to kind of develop their own line of questioning, their own investigation into it. That might not lead them to Buddhism, it might lead them to something else, who knows? But at the very least, you're kind of encouraging them on a quest in a way, encouraging them to investigate and question and look deeply into something that they probably haven't before. And I think that's pretty much a good thing. In many ways, that would probably be like the most Buddhist, sneaky Buddhist thing to do. It's like, oh yeah, this is really hard. Maybe they want to say, well, what does this religion say about that? What does that religion say about that? Maybe there's no religion anyway, so it doesn't matter, and they just chose to end their life because they were suffering. What's wrong with that? So it can get them to question and investigate. And you're going to kind of have to do that anyway. I think as part of somebody's trying to figure out, trying to understand why somebody would do something like that, there's a kind of a natural line of questioning that arises. Yeah, it's very good, Karuna. Like I said, I had all these kind of non-specific Buddhist things to say, and some of those similar to what you said and some different. But trying to stick within the framing of the question makes it. So yeah, that's good. Rick says, Bhante, can you share some reflections on skillful use of hearing in Otapa without falling into unwholesome shame, fear, or moral dread? Thank you. Well, one of the things that are actually good things, but can be taken to extremes, is something like shame. Hearing in Otapa are related to action. Like you would feel such a shame, you'd feel such kind of disgust, such fear to do this unskillful action, that would help you to not do it. It's a very useful skill, very useful thing to have. In our modern society, we've kind of lost the purpose behind these things and why they can be good, and we focus only that they're bad things, and we just, no more shaming, no more this, no more that, no more judging. Where the Buddha is actually the opposite. The Buddha is like, you should judge, but you should judge based on these criteria and make sure your intentions, and that you're not, are you judging the same thing? Are you doing the same thing you should be judged by? And so it's like the Buddha tells us we can do these things, but we should do them in a skillful way that minimizes any kind of unskillfulness that would arise, or that you're especially in regard to your intentions. Things like bad monks should probably be called out more, both by lay people and monastics. That's not something you're going to see much of in Buddhist countries. People in society who are doing bad things. Some people are say, well, in other cultures, or blah, 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 and, kind of use this moral relativism, which, it might have a point in an anthropology class. But when you're talking about ethics and morals within a culture, you're in that culture. right? So you should follow the morals of that culture that you're living in, right? And in that culture, this is how things are. So you will rightly be judged by the morals of that culture. This is there's your moral relativism. So what I would say is it's very good that you have these things. If you don't have a sense of shame, then what's to stop you from doing anything? It's like the Buddha says, there's one thing that if done, a person could do anything else. That's telling a deliberate lie. Right? Telling a deliberate lie seems like a small thing, but if you're willing to do that, you're willing to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. There's no shame. There's no fear of wrongdoing. You just keep going, falling deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into a pit of unskillfulness. So you should reflect on this and develop this kind of skillful shame, skillful fear of wrongdoing. Now, our minds might bring up some unskillful shame. Like, and you reflect on this and you say, let me investigate my mind, let me investigate my sila, let me investigate this, and you look, it's, this kind of shame is actually not helping me. It's not really pointing me towards anything skillful. I don't need to listen to this. I can let this go. So it's a matter of knowing what is skillful and unskillful shame and fear, and not letting that unskillful shame cause you undue suffering or cause you to act in unskillful ways. People can gaslight you with shame. They can say things, and if you're like a very agreeable person like me, you might actually believe them, or you might actually feel bad just because somebody got angry with you. I have to do this to myself because my mind is such a way that if somebody's angry at me, it's like I automatically feel like I really did do something wrong, and I feel really bad. But I have to question myself. Whoa, wait a second. Let's go through this here. And then I go through this and I see. I'm like, that person's full of crap. I'm not. There's no reason for me to feel bad. Stop feeling bad. I have to tell myself, stop feeling bad. There's no reason to. You only feel bad when you've actually done something wrong. Only apologize when you've actually done something wrong. Right? And obviously, if you're a person who questions and understands themselves, and you really know, I really didn't do anything wrong. Because even still, I'll probably be like, I'm sorry. Well, I could have maybe phrased something a little bit better. Like, I still feel like I have to give something, which diplomatically might be a skillful thing, but there's still that part of me is just still, even though when I know I'm right, I feel like I have to give something, but it is what it is. So, you have to be careful with these things to make sure that they're skillful and they're not being used in unskillful ways by yourself or others. But otherwise, very important aspects. That's why the Buddha teaches them. That's why we should have them. He talks in the suttas about the things that people do when they don't have these hiri and otapa. So good things to have. Just have to be careful, especially if you're, like yourself and other people who do have some, trauma related to shame and things like that. I wouldn't say I have trauma related to shame and things like that, but the domineering Italian mother, the kind of shaming and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably where I have that. Oh, I'm wrong. People are angry at me. I must be wrong about, I think that's, a good chunk of where that comes from, from my childhood. And I have to be like, no, I know I'm right. Right. And I don't, I should not be doing this because this is unskillful. Yes, it is unskillful to apologize for something you didn't do, right? To not stick up for yourself. That's unskillful. That's not good. It doesn't help you. That's for sure. Ah, Jay. Yes, daylight savings happened. Yes. Yeah. I didn't realize it until basically already happened. Yeah. Like this is one of the great things about being a monk. You don't realize that when silly things happen. Like I saw something about the Oscars and I'm like, oh, those are still on TV? People still watch that stuff? Like, I don't know. I stopped watching those even before I was a monk. But but anyway. Or the same thing with the Super Bowl. It's like, oh, the Super Bowl's today? Joy of missing out, Jomo. All right. Okay, I'm backing up here. There's been an ADHD medication shortage. It's probably because they're pilling up every kid and every child in school these days, especially all the boys. That way, it was that way almost 20 years ago when I was a substitute teacher. I didn't like that at all. But anyway, one of the most overdiagnosed um, things that is diagnosed these days, ADHD, especially in children. I missed the question about divisive speech. Why did I not see that? I saw the two of you talking about the suicide and the actions and things like that. But where did I miss speech? Oh, there it is. There it is. All right. Yeah. Hey, Karuna, I'm not saying yours isn't. I'm not saying yours is not real. I know people who actually it is literally real. But I also know that it's heavily over medicated and over prescribed. So if they didn't over prescribe it so much, maybe there'd be more. Wouldn't be such a shortage. Anyway, I could just be speaking out of stupidity. So it doesn't. I'm not 100%. I'm still a little goofy in my mind anyway. So, but yes, I was not questioning your ADHD. Does not saying anything break the precepts? Or does saying something count as divisive speech? Does not saying anything break the precepts? in terms of, well, so you have to be clear here. The precept is not telling a deliberate lie. The other four aspects, the other three aspects, like divisive speech, that's part of right speech. That's part of the Noble Eightfold Path. So the three extra steps are not part of the precepts. They are extra. And the reason why they're extra is because they are much more subtle, harder aspects of speech to deal with. Not telling a deliberate lie is pretty gross. It's pretty like, I know I am telling a lie, but you know what? For my own benefit or for somebody else's benefit, I'm going to tell the lie, right? That's gross in multiple ways, but I mean, like, gross as in it's like, it's obvious, it's there. Whether my speech is divisive, or if I don't say something, is that divisive, or is that this or that? That's much more nuanced, much more refined. So I wouldn't say that this is not saying anything breaking the precepts. No, I wouldn't say that at all. The Buddha clearly says, so like when he's talking about the precept of not lying, you're called in front of the village council and they question you on a matter. And having seen, you say, I have not seen. Or having not seen, you say, I have seen. Right? So this is deliberately saying something that is the opposite of your experience. Like not saying anything. I mean, like that's in modern, that is a modern thing in America, right? It's called the fifth, pleading the fifth. Meaning that this, this law allows you to not say anything that can incriminate you. Is that lying? I don't think so. You're just simply not saying anything. Now, is there times where not saying anything is a lie? I suppose it's possible. Although I don't know that I can easily think up a scenario. Now, you could say that there might be times where not saying anything is unskillful. That's a bit easier to think of lots of scenarios about. But there's also probably way more times where saying nothing is more skillful. And I don't mean like in court. I mean just like, people just keep putting their foot in their mouth by saying more and more and more and more and more, right? And making things worse by saying we're quiet and silence is better. Like Karuna giving the advice about what she did with her friend, right? Sometimes the best thing is just to lend an ear, just to listen, not to keep interjecting your own speech into things. This is what I do. If I might interject my own experience in with a person, if and only if it supports them and it doesn't take away from their own experience. So it's a very nuanced thing to do. And supports by meaning like, yes, I have had your experience and I understand. I'm not going to tell you a bunch of things, but I'm listening, right? And so what that can do, if done skillfully, is give that person is like, oh, okay, I'm with somebody who understands at least a little bit my experience, and they want me to talk. They want me to, they're listening. Right? That's really good for people. That's really something that a lot of people would a lot of people would like a lot more of that. But yeah, when a family member is having an affair, is not telling their spouse an act of compassion, or is it a lie of omission? This is a minefield. I mean, this is even before I was a Buddhist. This was a discussion I've experienced, both in person and also in just the society, like on a talk radio. Should I do it or should I not do it? Um, what I would say is, if you do it, don't expect the person who you think is getting harmed to thank you for it. They probably won't. They might actually blame you as much as they blame the other person. You're trying to break us apart, etc., etc., etc. So, if you want to tell the truth, you have to be prepared that it will not go in any perfect, wonderful way that you think it's going to go. You have to be prepared that it will blow back in your face. You will lose friendships over it, right? And that's just, I mean, about what happened directly to you. Obviously there might be the couple will have all kinds of issues and things like that. So, that's a tough thing. Now, some people have done things like, send an anonymous letter or something like that, or something that like makes the person think and question and start to maybe figure it out for themselves. But what they say is, most of the time people know already, but they just want to stay oblivious because they don't want to believe it's true. So you're going into a hornet's nest. It's the same thing like you see a couple fighting and the man hits the woman and you go to defend the woman, and then all of a sudden both the woman and the man are hitting you because you hit her man. This is actually a case that has happened multiple times. Should you have gotten involved? It's a good question. So yeah, I think if you do something like that, you have to be prepared for all kinds of eventualities, and that you're not going to necessarily be seen as some good, helpful person. So I would say, if you choose to do it, figure out the most skillful, least damaging possible way to do it. That's what I would say. Bante, if you're not sure the information would be beneficial, wouldn't it be better to remain silent? That's a choice you have to make. I mean, is a relationship where the people are not really faithful to each other beneficial? I mean, if it's, what do they call these things, that polyamorous and polycules and all that kind of stuff, where it's like, that kind of stuff. That's different. But it's another thing if it's like a monogamous relationship and people, sometimes, often, maybe they're both cheating on each other. They're just, it's like, oh, well, they're going to cheat on me, I'm going to cheat on them. And it just becomes a mess. So it's not necessarily the most beneficial thing that they not know. Also depends on beneficial for who. It might be the most beneficial thing for you not to get involved. There's no there's no easy answer to that. You would have to figure out what you can live with. This is not something that's happened to me personally. I wouldn't know. Like, I wouldn't know how I would do it. I don't think it's an easy answer. But yes, what you're pointing to is, the where the Buddha says, I do not speak unless it's factual, truthful, beneficial, said in a kind way, timely, etc. So beneficial can mean, in the long run. Sometimes in the short run, you have to go through some pain for things to be better in the long run. Hello, Visaka. Hello, Julie. This is not Julie L, is it? Is this a different Julie? Because the icon is not something I remember, unless the icon changed anyway. So anyway, can you speak on change in perception? I was bothered by numb, tingling feelings in legs and feet before. Today it tripped me up how it doesn't bother me nor hurt anymore. Okay, all right. Just change the icon. Okay. Perception is anicca, right? It's impermanent. So your perception of an experience today might not be the perception of the same experience tomorrow. Even if not many other factors change. Maybe you, I don't know, every day you go to, in the morning before work, on the way to work, you stop at the Starbucks. Maybe you don't go in. Maybe you go to the drive-through. I saw a drive-through at a Starbucks, I don't know, like 2 months ago, and it was like 40 cars, and I thought these people were ridiculous. But then I reflected on all the ridiculous things I've done in my life, and I was like, okay, I get it. But anyway, back to the thing. So every day you stop at the drive-through to get the same, and you like your same coffee, the same thing, grande latte thingy with the swirly thingy, whatever, all these things. And even if all of those factors are the same, say every day you get the same server, what do they call them? You get the same server, right? Every day, every day, 90% of the factors, barista, thank you. 90% of the factors are the exact same. Even still, your perception can be different from day to day, because your perception is clouded by a variety of different things. One day your perception is the person's happy. The next day your perception is they're not so happy. Maybe both days they basically feel the same, but there's something about your perception that makes you feel like there's something different about them. Perception is conditioned. I think there's a variety of different causes and conditions that lead to you perceiving something in a specific way at that specific time. That will be perceived different in another specific way, perhaps even at the same specific time, another day. So this is why perception always has to be questioned and investigated. You can't just trust it blindly. And so you could even reflect, okay, I don't know, maybe you were meditating and you got numb, tingling feelings in your leg. And today you meditated maybe the same time and there's no numb, tingling feelings in your legs. Well, what's different? Was there something different in your posture? Did you sit a different way on the cushion? Did you? So, you know, that difference can point you towards that there were different causes and conditions that led to that. And especially in terms of sitting meditation, that can really help you over time develop your posture in such a way that there's a lot less suffering in your meditation when you're sitting. Hello, Anna. When I ended my first serious romantic relationship, my girlfriend committed suicide. How does this affect her and my karma? Well, we know that suicide is not good karma. It's not good to cause the killing of any being. You know, again, we can always talk about gradations. I mean, is it the same amount of karma as being a serial killer? No, most likely not. I mean, Buddha doesn't. I mean, I guess he kind of does talk about, there's dark karma, white karma, and both dark and white karma, and there's mixtures and things like that, shades of gray, if you want to call it. But no, we know this is not a skillful thing to do. Even though we can, understand maybe some of the causes and conditions as to why. Right? We can empathize with that person. Say, wow, there's so much suffering and things like that. But we know that that's not a good thing. So, but, unless you said with intention, go kill yourself, and you really intended for them to kill themselves, that has nothing to do with your karma. Now we feel guilty in such a way. I mean, I can only imagine the kind of guilt that would put on a person. Right? That's why people use that as a relationship, as a tactic. If you break up with me, I'll kill myself. Now, most of the time, they're not going to do that. Sometimes they might, but that's a manipulation tactic. Right? That's not a good, skillful thing being done to you. And if they do end up killing themselves, that's on them. I mean, unless you were like evil and manipulative and gaslighting and, like were a really bad, person towards them intentionally, that's, maybe there's some karma involved in that. But, otherwise, that would be their own karma, right? Each person is the owner of their own karma, heir of their karma. have their karma as their relative. You're not responsible for anybody else's karma. You're only responsible for your own. So you should act accordingly. Just checking the chat. We are coming to the end of the first hour. So I'll keep an eye out for the next couple of minutes for any questions. And if nothing, then we'll probably call it a night. This is the most, this is the deepest thinking I've done in a week. Because and I can feel like the strain and the limitations of my mind. When I go into these allergy comas, it's just brain fog and muddle mindedness for a week, and no energy, and it's a mess. But anyway, Karuna says, I've been thinking a lot about Chulapantaka. When my ADHD makes me feel like I can't practice, I find a lot of comfort in the struggle. Tell us about that. I don't know. The name doesn't come up. What topic, Gregory? Ah. Well, I wouldn't. I don't think that there's something specifically in the suttas per se. What there is okay. So in the suttas, what you'll find is the small, less than a handful of suttas where a person commits suicide, but they were already an arahant, or in the process of dying, they became an arahant. And you see in the suttas that the monks are like, oh man, this monk did a bad thing. And they go to the Buddha. I mean, it's clear that the monks feel like this is not a good thing that this monk killed themselves. And they go to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, well, this monk was awakened. They are blameless, right? So the Buddha is clarifying that an awakened being doing it is blameless. So by inference, you would say, well, then that means suicide is a blameful act. Now, most people are not going to read the monastic Vinaya, so you're not going to necessarily see in the Parajika for killing. Parajika are the 4 rules that, if done, you're not a monk anymore. It's just instant monastic death. You're not a monk anymore. Any kind of sexual intercourse, any kind of, well, not any kind of stealing of a certain level. Stealing under a certain level is still a rule break, but it's not you're not a monk anymore. Falsely claiming an attainment, and murder, killing. And in the section on killing, there's 3 things that the Buddha mentions. That if you cause somebody, if you do this, if you cause somebody to do this, or you encourage somebody to do it and then they do it, you've done the prajika. You're not a monk anymore. What are the 3 things? Suicide. Why? There's a story of these monks who are like, oh, it would be really good for this person to die. So why don't we just encourage them to suicide? It's a really good thing. And the person does. Right? You're done. Like, so encouraging somebody to do it, helping somebody to do it, doing it yourself, it's a rule breach for a monk. Suicide is one. Euthanasia is the other. Right? Oh, yeah, you're suffering. Don't worry. Go kill yourself. All good. Nope, not good. Any kind of praising, encouraging, telling people to have euthanasia, like in Canada, where I have not good words to say about these people, this government in Canada, that's like somebody gets, has a lifelong horrible injury from taking the vaccines, and they say, well, we offer you our death pod. Why don't you can euthanize yourself? Why not? Like some woman gets, some athlete gets hurt, and instead of having to wait 8 months for a surgery, they say, well, you can euthanize yourself. Why not? That's evil stuff, man. That is downright evil. But anyway, so no, no, cannot encourage that, and I've come a long way on that. There was a time for most of my life where I actually felt that that's actually no problem. You should be able to do that if you like. But even before I was a monk, I started realizing that's probably not the best thing to encourage. And the other thing is abortion, which obviously is a very hot topic among Western Buddhists, obviously. But if I were to encourage it, help somebody have it done, or do it, done, gone, not a monk anymore. Right? So these 3 things, suicide, euthanasia, and abortion, are clearly stated in the monastic Vinaya as unskilled. They're clearly stated as killing, right? And not to be encouraged, not to be, helped to be done, etc. for a monk, right? Not good things. Now, does the Buddha have this rule for lay people? Does he put it in the first precept? Not to, like some people add, like you should be vegetarian. First precept says you have to be vegetarian. It has to be this. Well, then if you go with that, you could say, well, it means you shouldn't suicide, euthanasia, abortion, etc., etc., etc. Right? It just goes into a whole mess. But this is the framework of where I can clearly say, from multiple aspects, from the sutta and Vinaya, that this is never anything that should be encouraged. And it's not something that in any way is ever skillful. It can be blameless if you're an arahant. Still very, very, that whole thing of the arahants and suicide is still very controversial to this day. It's so hotly debated. It's a wild thing. But anyway, I think I just went on a long rant, a long thing trying to explain your question about suttas related to karma and suicide. His brother was going to, okay, this is going back to Karuna talking about the Chulapantaka Sutta. His brother was going to make him leave the order because he was too slow to memorize a single line of Dhamma. Oh, that sounds like me. He might have had ADHD, or he had maybe dyslexic as well. It's possible. Yeah, yeah. How was he young or was he old? Because me and memorization are not exactly the best of friends since I've become a monk. But anyway, yes, when the Buddha told him to hold a piece of cloth. I remember that part of the story. Yes. Visakha talking about Bhante Samahita. Yeah, I wouldn't say I followed him as much as he was one of like three, four, five monks who I knew online in my early days. Um, like I say, I always talk about Bhante Yuddhadhammo, obviously Bhante Ajahn Brahm. His stuff was recorded. Bhante Samhita was also on there as well. He was one of those. There's another monk, Ashin Otina. I think that maybe was his name. But yeah, Bhante Samahita was one of those monks I remember from the old days, and a few videos here and there. And yeah, he did kill himself. That was only what, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if that. That's yeah. I mean, I don't even remember the specifics of why. I hope you are well. Hey, perennial daydreams. Um, I'm alive and mostly okay. So yeah, I guess I'm mostly well. Visaka says, please don't let the Canadian government keep you away. Oh, well, they might let me in. I hope they don't throw me in a pod while I'm there, though. But uh, anyway. Oh, perennial daydreams. You want me to unwrap this rabbit hole? Oh man. This is a danger zone. This is a minefield. What it actually means to dedicate merit? What does it actually do? Um, if you want the short sutta answer, not much. A lot of like the sharing of merits and things like that, a lot of the aspects of that is post sutta. It's not something you see in the suttas. There is at least one aspect of it that you do see in the suttas. But it's not even anything necessarily that the Buddha encouraged or taught. It's just a thing that was done in the culture at the time. So there's a sutta where a Brahmin comes to the Buddha and says, it is part of our tradition that when a loved one passes on, we do an offering for them in hopes that that offering will help them in their, wherever they are. And so he asked the Buddha, does that work? Does that reach them? And the Buddha says, yes, in one place. That's the Peta, the ghost realm. If they're a hungry ghost, if they're in the Peta realm, then yes, sharing, a merit, food or whatever can actually be of benefit to them. And my favorite part of that whole sutta is, well, then the guy goes, obviously, if you lost a loved one in this life, you don't really want to think that they're in a state of woe, right? Like a ghost realm. So the Brahmin goes, well, what if they're not in the ghost realm? And the Buddha says, Brahmin, it would be impossible that through all these many lives that you've lived, that you do not have relatives in the ghost realm. Right? So what is the Buddha doing right there? The Buddha is taking you from your kind of in this life, on the ground perception of your relatives in this life, and retching you out to the grand scheme and saying, what about all your other relatives from all your other lives? Like that when I didn't realize that when I first read this sutta, but like, a couple years ago when I reread it, I thought about it, I was like, wow. That's what he's doing with metta. He's breaking you out of my relatives to all beings, right? Share your merit. You don't know who you know from whatever life, and what does the Buddha say? You'd be hard pressed to meet somebody who it was in one life wasn't your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, spouse, child, etc. So this is a kind of a method of widening your scope, right? The Buddha is telling you it'd be impossible that you have no relatives in the ghost realm, Brahmin. But so, there is some sutta scriptural basis for a loved one passes on, and you bring a dana to the monks, and the monks, do a little chant, and they say, may your loved one. See, Bhante G was always very simple about this, and he's very, like in the Thai forest and like places like a empty cloud, there'd be like, does anybody have any blessing or wishes for people who are still alive, and all these things, and I'm like, why? What's the point? I mean, it's nice. It's like nice, warm feelings, I guess, but it really doesn't do anything. And this is not only empty cloud. I've seen this in multiple like kind of Thai forest places, at least with bhikkhunis. But it, really the sutta. If you want to say anything in terms of what is sutta based, it's only sharing merit for our relatives if they are in the ghost realm. Right? And again, it's not something that the Buddha is. You never find a sutta where the Buddha says, "This is how you do this," etc. Right? That's not in the suttas. In this one sutta, because the Brahmin has asked the question, he responds, and so we can say, "Okay, yeah, when your loved one dies, now, not even thinking about merit and all these other things." Is it as somebody who has lost somebody, and I know what it's like to lose multiple close loved ones. Is it does it help with the grieving process? It is a wonderful thing to do something good in honor of the person. Yes, 100%. In Catholicism, when my mom, she can't do it anymore. She hasn't been able to go to church in years. But even up until maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, my mom every year was having masses said for my wife, who's now dead almost 20 years, right? That's what you do in Catholicism. You have masses said in their name. In Buddhism, well, I think after a week, and then after 3 months, and then after a year, you come to the monastery and you give a dana in their name, right? It doesn't even necessarily have to be about some kind of transfer of anything to somebody else somewhere in some other realm. It can be about you going through a good process that will help you through the grieving process. It's like after my wife died, myself and my brother and sister-in-law, we all got involved in American Cancer Society, and we did all kinds of great things, different events and things like that. And it felt really good to do something like that. It doesn't help Jackie. She's dead. It doesn't help her at all. But it helps me. and it helps the people that I'm helping, right, who are alive. So it's not to say that there's nothing skillful about doing something like that, or as Karuna says, in defiance, she says, "I'm going to put your name in the blessings bowl next time I go." An empty cloud, right? Nothing wrong with that. This is a nice thought. Thank you very much. It's very nice that somebody would think about me. But there's no sutta or anything that kind of proves or shows that that's actually going to do anything for me. Now maybe if I'm sick and you come and you chant a sutta for me, that might be a little different story. That's an interesting thing that you find in the suttas. Even the Buddha is cured by somebody chanting Dhamma to him when he's sick. So that's a different story. That's an interesting thing. But so what I would say is, because Westerners really have problems with this in many ways. Hey, look at me. I'm a Westerner. I'm kind of I wasn't born into it. I'm kind of like, man, I don't know how much sense that makes. And I'm a monk. I've been doing this for 20 years and I still have these, let alone somebody who's getting into it. And they're like, well, this seems silly. But there doesn't necessarily need to be a sutta basis or a metaphysical basis for doing something good and skillful. There's still good reasons to do something like that. It's just not something you're going to find the Buddha talk about in the early texts. So if you like, so I'll give you, so dedicating me, I just saw your question about what does it exactly mean to dedicate merit? Like I say, when I did all those, fun events for the American Cancer Society, right? I did it in Jackie's name. I dedicated my merit to her, technically. And does that mean that there was some actual kind of transfer of something to her in her next life? I don't know. Buddha doesn't really say anything about that. But it was still something that was beneficial to me and others. So that's what it is. It's like dedicating merit is you do something good and you dedicate it to somebody else. Part of the Theravada tradition is that the devas, devas and people who are in certain realms can see that and rejoice in that good deed, and that is a benefit to them. I don't know that that's in the suttas at all. I could be wrong. Could be wrong. If somebody knows the sutta, point it to me. I don't know that that's in the suttas, but that is part of the tradition for sure. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. If you feel better next weekend, we'll know. I could be dead next weekend. If I'm dead next weekend, then put me, have a dana for me because I could be in the Peta realm. You never know. All right. All right, friends. Well, do take questions and energy. We went another 20 minutes over. Very good. So, but I think I'm going to call it here. So, friends, Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again. Have a good day.